Welcome to another episode of All About Art. If you're new here, All About Art is a podcast with a mission of demystifying the professional arts sector by publishing interviews with people working in the arts as they talk about their education, career paths, and more, spotlighting the cultural sector as a really great place to work. I also produce solo episodes like this one, where I talk about different topics in the art world from the point of view of someone who works in it. Right now, full-length interviews of All About Art are audio only, but depending on where you're tuning in, you can either watch the solo episodes or just listen in. Before we continue, if you tune into this episode and you enjoy it, help us out by hitting the thumbs up or rating the podcast over on the streaming site of your choice, as it helps us continue to produce the show. Now, let's talk about biennales, or biennials, however you want to pronounce it. Today's episode is structured into 6 parts. Number 1, what a biennale is. Number 2, why it exists. Number 3, how it evolved. Number 4, key controversies and structural issues. Number 5, what's coming up in 2026 and how you can get involved. And number 6, finally, what I think the future of biennales might look like. Let's begin. So, what is a biennale? What does it look like? The word biennale comes from the Latin biennium, meaning every 2 years. In its simplest form, a biennale is a large-scale, international, contemporary art exhibition that takes place every 2 years. The prototype is the Venice Biennale, which was founded in 1895. It was first proposed in 1893 by Venice's mayor, Riccardo Salvatico, and opened in 1895 as an international exhibition of art. It was staged in the Giardini, a public park that now, due to the success of the Biennale, houses 30 permanent national pavilions. At the first edition, over 200,000 visitors attended, which is an astonishing number for the time. But to parallel this ongoing success today, in 2022, attendance reached over 800,000. It was originally dominated by European artists, but it has expanded throughout the 20th century in both artists and mediums. In the 1930s, it introduced music, cinema, and theater. And architecture was one that was added in 1980, which now happens every other year, taking turns with the Art Biennale. What does a biennale look like? Typically, there are national pavilions where countries select and present artists. There is a central exhibition curated by an appointed artistic director, highlighting their thematic vision for the biennale. There are collateral events, which are technically independent but officially recognized projects across the host city. And there are also talks, performances, educational programming. And all of this occurs across a duration of a couple of months. In Venice's case, it's from May to November. So why do biennales exist? Originally, biennales were a space for international cultural exchange, and during a time of ever-increasing globalization, they were an important way for nations to assert and protect their identities through culture. The early Venice model was deeply tied to nationalism, specifically the vision of countries presenting their best artists, in architectural pavilions designed to embody national identity. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, biennales evolved from national showcases into curator-led mega exhibitions. In the case of the central exhibition in Venice, the internationally acclaimed curator became more dominant and able to shape a vision for the international art scene. In my personal opinion, nowadays, this is also a response to how increasingly connected the art world digitally has become. We have a constant sharing of opinions across nations and vast perspectives, and this gives a key opportunity to champion certain frameworks. Biennales have increasingly centered on the themes that caused waves in national schools, like postcolonial discourse, identity politics, migration, climate change, and global capitalism. The exhibition has become a site for investigation through art, which is what we're all here for, really. On the surface, many biennials still operate through national pavilions and state funding models. They retain the framework of nationalism, the same division into pavilions that began in Venice. Over the past 2 decades, the rapid expansion of biennials, triennials, and quadrennials has paralleled the financial boom of the global art market. The growth has been so dramatic that an organization called the Biennial Foundation, founded in 2009, now exists simply to catalog and connect these recurring exhibitions. As truly incredible as this is, its proliferation suggests some degree of saturation. In other words, the Biennale has shifted from being an occasional global event to a permanent fixture in the art world, and a really important one at that. To understand how this format evolved, it helps to look at a few of the exhibitions that shaped it. The most iconic is, as I've already mentioned, the Venice Biennale, which has linked art, diplomacy, and national prestige. Then there's the São Paulo Biennial, founded in 1951 by Francisco Sicilo Matarazzo. As the second oldest biennial, it was crucial in shifting the art world's access beyond Europe and North America. It positioned Latin America as more than a peripheral participant in shaping modern art discourse, which, truthfully, it always should have been. 4 years later, in 1955, Germany launched Documenta in Kassel. Held every 5 years, Documenta developed a different identity. Specifically, it is more research-driven, often slower, and more theoretical. It became a space for reflection after World War II, and later a platform for ambitious curatorial frameworks that attempt to rethink art history and frameworks we share in the arts today. Fast forward to 1995 and the founding of the Gwangju Biennale. Located in a city marked by South Korea's 1980 democratic uprising, it carries an explicitly political legacy. From its inception, it has been closely tied to questions of democracy, memory, and civic engagement. And in the United States, the Whitney Biennial, first held in 1932 at the Whitney Museum of American Art. It's long served as the barometer of contemporary American art. It regularly generates controversy and public scrutiny, becoming a flashpoint for broader cultural tensions. Taken together, these exhibitions show how flexible the Biennale format can be. They can be intense and often overwhelming, but there are also moments of concentration, and the few I've been to in my career always allow me to walk away with a new breadth of knowledge and understanding of the contemporary art world. Now, let's look at some structural issues and controversies, because biennales are never really neutral spaces. They gather money, politics, nationalism, private patronage, artists, activists, and media attention into one highly visible moment. When that many voices converge, I think we can all assume that some friction is inevitable. For my history of art listeners, let's start at the very first Venice Biennale in 1895. The jury awarded top honors to established painters like Giovanni Segantini and Francesco Paolo Michetti. But public attention gravitated elsewhere towards Giacomo Grosso's painting, Supreme Meeting, which depicted nude women gathered around an open coffin. Religious authorities condemned the work as immoral and demanded its removal. Organizers attempted a compromise, placing it in a separate room. Instead of diffusing the tension like they had perhaps intended, the isolation actually amplified the curiosity of visitors and the guests, and so the painting ended up becoming a sensation. In the end, it won a prize through popular vote. So from its inception then, the Biennale was caught between public appetite and this idea of moral policing. But I guess nowadays, that's a position that we're really all too familiar with, especially in the arts. I'm not really saying anything new. Fast forward more than a century to the 2017 and 2019 Whitney Biennials. In 2017, American painter Dana Schutz came under criticism for depicting the mutilated corpse of Emmett Till, the 14-year-old black boy murdered in 1955 in a piece called Open Casket. For further context, Dana Schutz is a white woman. This sparked outrage and a very visible protest where Parker Bright stood in front of the piece for up to 4 hours a day, wearing a shirt that reads "No Lynch Mob" on the front and "Black Death Spectacle" on the back. Schutz responded by stating, quote, "I don't know what it is like to be black in America, but I do know what it is like to be a mother." Emmett was Mammy Till's only son. The thought of anything happening to your child is beyond comprehension. It is easy for artists to self-censor, to convince yourself not to make something before you even try. There were many reasons why I should not make this painting, but art can be a space for empathy, a vehicle for connection. In my personal opinion, looking back, although it was something that caused a lot of contention, these instances are incredibly important to understand where we are in the current moment and to start conversations required to move forward as a society. 2 years later, in 2019, artists participating in the Whitney Biennial protested the presence of Warren B. Kanders on the board of the Whitney Museum of American Art. Kanders owned a company that manufactured tear gas, which had been used against migrants on the US-Mexico border. Artists argued that exhibiting socially engaged or politically critical art inside an institution funded by profits from state violence created an ethical contradiction. Several artists threatened to withdraw their work, and ultimately, Kanders actually resigned from the board. This moment exposed a core tension in the contemporary biennial model. Exhibitions often foreground themes like migration, racial justice, and state power, yet they are embedded in financial systems tied to the structures they critique. Only 3 years later, at Documenta 15 in 2022, in its 15th edition, curated by the Indonesian collective Ruang Rupa, was one of the most polarizing exhibitions in recent memory. The show aimed to decentralize the Western art world by foregrounding collectives from the global South and experimenting with shared resource models. However, shortly after opening, a large banner by the Indonesian collective Taring Padi was accused of containing anti-Semitic imagery. Their mural, People's Justice, depicted anti-Semitic caricatures, including a soldier with a pig's head and a Star of David. The collective of artists addressed the accusations of antisemitism in a statement clarifying their intentions. I do recommend reading the whole statement, linked in the show notes, but in essence, they contextualized that People's Justice was created in 2002 during the oppressive regime of Suharto in Indonesia and aimed to expose the complex power dynamics behind historical injustices inspired by the artist's experiences with the Indonesian genocide in 1965. The artists acknowledge, however, that although their imagery was meant to critique militarism and state violence, their representation of Israel was flawed, and they express sincere regret for any offense caused. The work was eventually removed, but the debate escalated. The scandal led to the resignation of director Sabine Schwamann, and German politicians, media, and cultural leaders questioned the curatorial framework itself. Discussions of anti-Semitism and freedom of expression collided in highly charged ways. The Biennale format promises global dialogue, but it also compresses vastly different political histories into a single exhibition space, which can become quite rife with uncomfortable presentations. After learning this history, let's pivot to what is upcoming and how you, as a listener, can get involved. The 61st Venice Biennale will open on the 9th of May and run until November 22nd, 2026. It will be realized according to the vision of the curator Koyo Kuo, who tragically passed away in 2025. Kuo, born in Cameroon, was executive director of the Zeitz MoCA in Cape Town. She would have been the first African woman to curate the Venice Biennale. Other upcoming major biennials are set to occur in Australia, South Korea, and other amazing cities. For anyone watching this in video form, I will put a longer list on screen, and for those of you listening in, check out my Substack where I will include the full list. At this point, I also want to mention the Next Gen Fellowship here, which has offered a member a once-in-a-career opportunity via a fully funded fellowship and a month-long residency at the Venice Biennale, because we want to talk about opportunities that these biennales offer. Biennales are such amazing places to work and learn, and we thought it was an opportunity worth supporting and offering to our Next Gen members. The fellow will be spending half their time working at the British Pavilion, and the other half is dedicated to their own independent research or creative project inspired by the Biennale and Venice. Fellows receive a grant to support travel, accommodation, and living costs, plus training and mentorship. So it's a really well-rounded opportunity. And the reason why I'm mentioning this here is that I personally see Biennales as this amazing cultural happening that offers so much. It's a global stage to exhibit art, a format for having really hard discussions, and a place where emerging professionals can go to get some of the most amazing experiences the art world has to offer. These events are not as closed off as they may appear, but I think they do require initiative, and I think it's also important to not be afraid to challenge them. Let's touch on the debate of the independent curator, but only ever so briefly, because I think that this could be an entire episode in itself, to be completely honest. A recent article in Frieze magazine asked the question, who killed the independent curator? In the mid-2000s, curators would leave museum posts to lead biennales independently. Now, many retain multiple high-level positions simultaneously. I'll put the link in the episode's bio, and I do recommend you read it, but in a nutshell, the article suggests, quote, what biennials now seek in a potential candidate is not their contribution to art discourse, but the institutional relations they symbolize. That's a really big claim, and I think that it compels us to reflect on whether the criteria for selecting curators have become increasingly superficial, prioritizing visibility and connections rather than genuine expertise. Although I don't necessarily agree with the claim, I think it's worth talking about, and it opens larger questions about career mobility, gatekeeping, and whether the sector is becoming structurally immobile. For me, it prompts a curiosity on if this trend is a recent phenomenon driven by the digital age, or if there has always been an undercurrent of superficiality in these choices that we're only sort of now recognizing, which I think is more the case. As I touch on the debate surrounding the independent curator, I recognize this could warrant an entire episode on its own, as I said, so please put in the comments if that's something that you'd be interested in hearing, because there is so much that I think we could talk about. I thought that to end this episode, we should explore a future for Biennales and what I think they will look like in the next decade. So personally, I would love to see more programming for children. This could include interactive workshops, hands-on art projects, and storytelling sessions that not only spark creativity, but also foster a deeper appreciation for the arts from a young age. It was something that I saw at the Diriyah Art Biennale in Saudi Arabia that I thought was really cool. Late night openings enhancing accessibility for those who may have busy daytime schedules. Also something that I saw at the Diriyah Contemporary Art Biennale, they were open until 11 p.m. Clearer communication for non-art audiences. This is something I think can be further implemented in most spaces, and it can be as straightforward as simplifying jargon in exhibition texts, providing more context, or offering guided tours that intentionally cater to those who may not be familiar with contemporary art. I think themed routes for different interests, allowing visitors to explore the spaces from different angles or interests, could be really cool. And more artist-curator talks where creative decision-making is discussed openly. I think it could be a great opportunity to explore the dynamic relationships that occur behind the scenes. But of course, I would be interested in something like that with the podcast that I run and the themes that I'm typically very interested in. And finally, I think that a stronger integration with local communities could be good. To me, this would ideally look like community art initiatives and outreach programs that not only engage residents, but also celebrate local culture, which I'm sure exists already to some extent, but I want to highlight that it's a really, really important thing. Biennales are at their best when they feel like cultural festivals. So ultimately, the key question isn't, are Biennales good or are they bad? It's, who are they for? Who gets to participate? And who gets to shape them? As always, thank you so much for listening to this episode of All About Art.